So I've talked about this a little bit in my prior podcasts, but encountering wisdom is really here to pick topical subjects that are universal in the way that they may impact or afflict our own human nature. And I'm super excited today because I have a guest with me. And Kyle, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself because you'll do a much more eloquent job of that than I will. So please take a minute and introduce yourself, and then I can talk a little bit about the topic that we've decided to cover.
I love it. I'm excited about the topic today. Grateful to be here. I'll fill you in a little on my background if you're listening at home. So my name is Kyle Emanuel Brown, and I've been in the mind, body, spirit, transformational coaching space for the last 25 years professionally. I like to say I've been in the game 48 years because I was born into it very young. A lot of these pieces that are now become chic and popular have all been part of my life experience since the beginning, which has been really neat. And I've been a true entrepreneur at heart who was focused on building a fitness empire. I did fitness and nutrition for celebrities and pro athletes and rock stars and rap stars in that world. And then, really got to the entrepreneurial space between that and a meal replacement shake company for 17 years and a radio show on ESPN, where I was burning the candle on both ends and nearly lost my life in the process of, really focusing on my health, but missing the prioritization of the inner peace and the slowing down and the stillness and, the deep levels of self-love that are all part of what I do now.
Great. Well, it's wonderful to have you here, and this concept of transformation, I think it's a really useful word in a couple of ways. Obviously, we continue to evolve in terms of our own being, our own human nature over the course of time. Hopefully, not everybody does, but hopefully there's a sort of a natural evolutionary process that comes with aging. And there are many times, and I'll use my life as an example, where I have been stuck. And I felt stuck, and I knew I was stuck, and I was wondering, how do I move through this? How do I transform my stuckness into the next layer and the next level? And the topic we spoke about is one that I personally have experienced where I felt stuck. Is the topic of forgiveness. And I know you've done a lot of work around this with some of your client base. I can really only speak about it from my own personal experience. But, the thing that is, forgiveness has lots of tentacles and lots of aspects, because by the fact of being born into humanity, we are going to be on the receiving end of hurt. Yes. At some point in our lives.
Absolutely.
Typically at many points, right? Yeah. And when we're on that receiving end, we really have a choice of how to react. And oftentimes that reaction the immediate reaction is a grievance. We build this grievance story about how somebody didn't return my phone call, or they ghosted me, or it could be much worse. They injured my child through some careless act. They chose to leave a relationship that I thought was fantastic, and they gave me no explanation. Many different sources of grievance. And in my case, I went through a late life divorce. This is not the only instance, but the one that's most immediate. And it was very hurtful, and it took me a long time to kind of work through to that forgiveness stage. But I reached it, it took about a year and a half, and it was a scenario where I had started meditating, and in my meditations, each day I would say I would go into a place of love and forgiveness. And I was intentional about using those words.
Yes.
And over a period of time, all the rancor, all the animosity, all the anger that I felt gradually dissipated. And happy to say that now my ex and I are on good terms with one another.
It's beautiful.
But I just share that with you as a way of sort of opening our dialogue, and maybe I can pass the baton over to you.
Yeah. I love that and can completely relate to that. I think as a coach, as a guide, as a healer, regardless of if it's in the physical realm that I started in, that then started moving into mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic realms, is you have to walk the path. And I feel that those of us that are called to deep transformational work have to be able to have a very wide net that we can catch some pretty heavy stuff. And the only way we can have that is through our own deep level of experience, where we can have the depth and the breadth of that experience in order to then help guide others. So when I look at forgiveness, the first place that forgiveness became a really big part of my life was when I was dealing with stress, anxiety, and panic attacks back in 2006. I was about a year into my meal replacement shake company. I was in the 110 hour a week realm, hustle. And I remember I'd wake up and I'd have my panic attacks around 2-3 in the morning. Wake up right in full blown panic. My wife would look at me like, what the heck is going on? And there was huge amounts of anxiety and stress and overwhelm. And then those would lead me down a shame spiral to the lowest vibrational levels of guilt and shame. And so what I found were two things. One was stand-up comedy, which I can get into a little bit later. And the other side of it was like, I'm a huge Beatles fan. And when I'm listening to the Beatles, when I'm driving, I'm chilled out, versus if I'm listening to something intense when I'm lifting weights, it's a completely different vibe. And I knew the Beatles were big fans of transcendental meditation. So I signed up for transcendental meditation classes, and I started there in 2006 and started adding in the third piece, which I learned in the past, which was emotional freedom techniques, EFT tapping. So that's like when you're tapping on the different acupuncture meridians. And what was so profound for me, my teacher was the teacher who taught Louise Hayes, who wrote things like You Can Heal Your Life. And she also was the right-hand woman of the man who created it. And as we were going through and addressing these different external stressors that could lead us into a place of feeling that we've been attacked, we would finish it with, and I deeply and completely love, forgive, and accept myself. Now, the myself piece I found fascinating, because why am I loving, forgiving, and accepting myself when I'm pissed off over here that this guy cut me off in traffic, or this guy took my money, or this guy manipulated things in the business? Why am I loving and forgiving myself? And so I sat with that in my other tool over here, the deep meditation, and came up with this awareness came through of that. In order to get what you want, you must first love yourself as you are. Meaning, let's start with the core of self-love, and that if you can't love yourself, how can you possibly love and forgive somebody else? So for me, all of it comes to that root of your outer world is a reflection of your inner world, which is all from Hermeticism. And then it gets branched out to the outside of when I'm in this state of self-love, self-respect, being whole, worthy, and complete, it makes it a lot easier for me to be able to then from there navigate forgiveness and acceptance and love for others.
Yeah. Well spoken. Yeah, that's beautiful. You know, it reminds me of both the symbolism and the direct messaging that came from Christ when he was on the cross. Forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. And being able to love other people, even through that whole, what had to be unbelievable sufferfest, right? And that's something that I think ties in with this concept of self-love.
It's a high level of embodiment that we can all strive for.
Yeah.
And I think that is a pinnacle example, story, experience that we can then apply into our lives and say, where can we be in forgiveness? Now, where I have a pretty unique spin on forgiveness, which has taken a long time for it to unfold, part of forgiveness for me with the external world fits into the way I look at Rapid Harmony, which is my brand, which is do no harm and take no shit. And I think that there is a part of that with forgiveness. And I think a lot of times people think forgiveness means I need to go back to being in that exact situation, back to where we were. Well, if we just forgive each other, we can just continue in that same trajectory. And sometimes forgiveness can come with a redirection and a transmutation of that energy and say, I forgive you for the way in which you acted, and I forgive myself for the way I acted that created that environment. But we're not going to move on like that. And we both get to choose how we move forward. And in some cases, the moving forward is, like Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank, you're dead to me. Sometimes the moving forward is you're not in my energetic awareness anymore, and I'm okay with that. And I wish you the best and I send you on your way. But in the preciousness of this life experience, I really don't want to interact with your energy anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That's a hard level with experience. It doesn't mean, hey, you did something wrong to me. I maybe set myself up in that situation, and now I still need to be in your energetic sphere on a regular basis. And sometimes the forgiveness, you can be in their energy even more, and that awareness from the forgiveness can elevate the relationship even better. Historically, if I'll give you a little example, if we look at little kids, boys especially, a lot of times when boys have conflict, historically, they've yelled it out, wrestled it out, slugged it out. And after they got it all out of them, they become bros, friends. It's a pretty amazing concept of forgiveness where it's like, hey, I now get honor, respect you in some capacity. And now we're buddies and now we laugh about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most men have had that experience.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. We should talk more about that in the sense of the fact that it's easy to confuse forgiving somebody and feeling like forgiveness is accepting the act that happened, as opposed to forgiving somebody and rejecting the act that happened.
I love that.
And I think it's easy to confuse those. I've seen this with people who are, they by nature are nurturing, and by nature they are pleasers. And they will, and I'm an example of this before I became aware of it in my life. They feel it, I felt as though sacrificing a certain part of myself was the right way to go about forgiving someone. Yeah. And it's not. It's very unhealthy, in fact. So I'd be interested to get your perspective on that.
Completely relatable. I think it's a bit of an empath's curse.
Yeah.
Right? The plus side of that is typically when somebody is like that, I can say, congratulations, you're not a psychopath. So that's fantastic.
That's good.
You probably don't actually have narcissistic personality disorder, of which I say 99% of the time I hear somebody say, oh, my ex he's a narcissist. I was like, we'll see. We'll see. Let's see. Now, are they all narcissists or are they a mirror? To me, with forgiving someone, the Buddhist statement that hit home hard for me is anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And so first part of forgiveness is it's actually a very selfish thing. You're taking it off of your own plate, right? I don't need to carry this backpack anymore of anger or rage towards anyone who has, quote unquote, done me wrong.
Right.
The second level of that is I look at anyone or anything that has done me wrong. And oh boy, if you are on a hero's journey or an entrepreneurial journey or something, you're going to have a lot of those stories, those quote unquote war stories.
Yeah.
But I don't want to carry all those backpacks with me. And part of the art of forgiveness of all of it, to me, is getting to the place where what once caused you tremendous pain can become hilarious and funny and take the pain away in some capacity. Now, that does not go for every situation. That does not go for a situation where someone is passing, by your physical right to autonomy through things like rape or anything horrible along those lines, or, things along the lines of physical abuse or anything along those lines. But a lot of the things that we hold on to heavy can actually relatively, once we zoom out, be pretty light. If you look at a lot of families fighting, I've coached for 25 years. I've seen people enraged and destroy their family relationships over the most menial nothing.
Yeah.
Like, I can't believe he hogged the remote control. And in that individual's eye, it's like he robbed a bank high on meth and then took 4 people out that were all, children on the way out. And I was like, it's just the remote control.
Yeah.
Come back to your breath, zoom out.
Yeah.
So the tool I use with my clients in this is what I call the microscope and the telescope. Okay. The microscope is important where you want to zoom in and focus in on this 3D video game of life experience that we're having so that you can build, create, do, experience, play full out, and have the joy. And also experience all the other emotions. So it's like, I'm here now and I'm present. The telescope is sometimes we're so in that we're in this just stress, overwhelm, chaos state because we're living in the past and the future, and we believe that this movie is way too real. So the telescope is that necessity to zoom out. And I wear this on my finger for that exact thing, working with, like a hawk eagle kind of medicine of like, they have that 30,000 foot view of looking down on the world and not taking everything so seriously. And that is one of the greatest ways to get to that level of inner peace. Now, forgiving and condoning, that gets a little more granular. And I think forgiving versus condoning the behavior are two polar opposite things. I can forgive you to not hold the weight of that and also to set you free. But I think it's an obligation of an empath to understand that we tend to not be confrontational. Right. I'm just as guilty of that. Like, there's 24 hours in a day. That's it. I don't want to waste one of these magical moments here in confrontation or conflict. I'm a peace-loving person. But what we are doing, if we condone people acting out of alignment, is we are missing a teaching moment and we're missing an opportunity to help them in their own personal evolution by standing okay with actions and behaviors that are out of alignment. Now, the part that gets hard for people to understand is that we've all been not only the victim, but also the villain in other people's stories.
Sure.
that is a big one for all of us to process, especially those of us who are like, I'm a peaceful, loving, amazing person, and I never do anything wrong, and I'm so great, and I'm just here to help everybody, through our own eyes and our own perception. But through other people's eyes and perception, we could be the villain in some stories. I'll give you a personal moment with that I think listening at home may shock you a bit, but also could give you a good awareness of seeing things from a 360-degree view. And it is my 10-year high school reunion. So I had two interesting things relative to what we're talking about today happen at my 10-year high school reunion. The first is I sat down at the table with a guy who was one of my best friends who we reconnected with, and we had fought over a interest in a particular girl that he ended up dating and never told me he liked. And I just, they showed up and she was holding hands with him and I was heartbroken over it. I'm like, never even told me. And I literally stopped hanging out with that friend group for years over it. We reconnected later as college kids, but we had the moment of sitting there and we'd gotten to the place of laughter over it at the reunion. When she came up, we're like, we let this situation destroy our friendship, and we were dying laughing over it. So we'd really gotten full circle on it. The second thing that happened was I almost didn't go to that because I always felt like a victim in high school, where I was shy and struggling. I was the only Jewish kid in my hometown. I felt like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
And my hometown's where they filmed Groundhog Day. But at that moment, and I was at the reunion, I had two girls come up to me and say, hey, you were my high school bully. And I was floored. I was like, I remember them sort of. And I remember like not wanting to date them. But I remember them being nice, and one was a neighbor. And I had the most tiny little recollection of them in my experience. And then the one girl said, you wrote something horrible in my high school yearbook, and I felt you were my bully. And the other one validated it. And I was shocked.
Wow.
I was like, honestly, I don't remember that. I'm not that same kid right now. I've dedicated my life to my personal development journey. Not been perfect along the way. And I went into a forgiveness state where I needed to not only apologize, but also ask for forgiveness. And please forgive me. Like, I am so sorry. I had no idea. I'm grateful that you told me about this so that you can move past it, because I didn't even know it existed in my experience. But obviously I did something that made you two both view me as your bully. And I am so sorry for that. Mm-hmm. And if they hadn't told me that, then their experience would have been, oh, there's our bully. What a prick. You know, I hope he XYZ. And then they put some bad juju on me. But I never even knew I was that person.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I wanted to chat about too, and we've all either experienced this personally, although we may not be aware of the experience of it, because we're in it, or we've been around somebody who is in it. And the it that I'm going to define is the grievance story, right? Like in getting back to my situation, I went through this divorce, and I formed a grievance story around why it happened, how it happened. And even though I'm pretty self-reflective, it was super easy for me at that point in my life to put 95% of the blame on my ex. It was her doing, it was her fault. You know, we'd still be together if she hadn't blah, 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 blah. And I enjoyed talking about it.
Yeah.
And that's the grievance story, right? And it, you know, as I moved through my own forgiveness process, I realized that talking about it was not serving me. It was only promulgating the story and that environment and causing me to live it close up, as opposed to, as you pointed out, drawing back to the 30,000 foot level and saying, wait a minute, let's observe here. And so we've all been around people who are stuck in their grievance story. And, I managed gratefully to move through mine. And I want, listeners who may be in the midst of their own anger, rancor, grievance story, and particularly those people who are still years later feeling bitter and angry about what happened without really successfully moving on with their lives.
Yeah. First thing that I would tell someone in that situation to do is to just sit with, is this story still serving me and the greatest good in the future of my life? And then secondarily, where am I receiving benefit from playing the victim in this story now, every time I tell it? That's a harder one to sit with.
Yeah.
Because you are receiving some sort of benefit from it, and it's keeping you in an uncomfortable comfort zone. This is what happened. It is what it is. This is the thing. They're the villain. I'm the victim in this situation. And, they left me, they hurt me, they betrayed me. And so therefore, that's why I am where I am right now. All women are X, all men are X, all this are that. And it will keep you in a confined prison-like experience without the expansion of your life, which is part of the purpose of being here, is to grow, expand, learn, and become the best and highest versions of ourselves. So you're actually putting yourself in a self-contained prison of familiarity by not having courage in that capacity or that field anymore. And we can then use our excuses to keep us from growing and expanding. Like, well, I'm too old. Well, I had that opportunity. Well, I'm not the guy I was. I'm not in the financial or emotional or fitness or age or whatever the blank is, to then move on and expand and have new experiences. And I just say, take your pulse. Are you here? If you can feel your pulse, then every other one of those excuses isn't valid anymore. If your intention is to answer the question, that isn't serving my best and highest anymore to have that story, so let's write a new story.
Mm-hmm.
I went through divorce. I was with somebody 6 years, married 2.5. And I had a lot of stories that I would keep saying about why things went the way they were. But fortunately, at the time, I had a really smart awareness just from having other people that I'd watch and observe in chaos. And I said, right at the end, I said, if we're going to fail at marriage, we're going to succeed at divorce. And we're going to have one of the healthiest endings to a marriage ever. Now, it wasn't what's becoming big in the spiritual community, this conscious uncoupling. Those words didn't exist at the time. It was much more of there's obviously not alignment here anymore going into the future of what we are doing and building. We have different goals, visions for what life is. And so I'm going to choose not to spread hate about you. I ask you not to spread any hate about me. Our parents are still friends. And I want to be at a pace of just neutrality. And so neutrality to me is a message on Facebook once a year on her birthday saying happy birthday, wishing you and your family the best. And I do feel net neutral about her. I did cord cutting, which is a very great ancient energetic thing that people can do around those emotions. And I received the same kind of message back the other half of the year. Moved on, got remarried, had kids, everything, expanded from there, and lots of other opportunities, challenges, struggles along those lines. But what I realized in that grieving process, and for me, there's been grieving in relationships and actually tremendous amount of grieving in the loss of friends who are quote unquote gone too soon in the course of my life. But what I've seen that is so important in these types of situations is the greatest way to get out of that grieving energy is through something that at the time will piss you off when you hear it if you're in the grieving state. But if you're not in it, you'll be like, oh yeah, of course. That is the medicine. That the greatest medicine is gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And when I have clients that are caught in mental loops in some sort of a grieving process, a guilt shame cycle, something that's going on in their life that is making them feel stuck, the first most important thing that I have them lean into is daily gratitude, not just for the sky and the sun and the moon and the stars and the breath, but daily gratitude for the actions they are taking to move towards alignment towards the best and highest version of themselves. And I'll have them text me that every single day, at least once. Because you need to shift the focus to build and create the reality you want going forward.
Right.
And most people think it's like, I need to get out of pain and build and create this amazing thing over here, but they miss the entire journey of trying to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so shifting out of that grievance cycle, if you want to focus on what went wrong, where did you go wrong? What was her fault? What was his fault? And everything like that. I think those are very valuable tools. Those are a lot of therapeutic tools. The way I look at it is I say, we need to subsect these things into two categories. One is archaeology, and the other one is architecture. Most of the time, we spend too much time in the archaeology side of this. What went wrong? Who's at fault? Where did I go wrong? What did I play a part in it? Where did my mom or my ancestors or their ancestors and their habits and everything lead to this? All valuable pieces, but it should really only take up, I'm going to make up a statistic and say 20% of your time, energy, effort, resources. 80% of it, which when you're in fitness, nutrition, everything, and you add up the percentages, you get to 270%, so not 100. So I'm going to say the majority of the time needs to be focused on the archaeology of who you are becoming and where do you want to go and what do you want to build. It's no different than the high school quarterback who sits around and tells stories about how life was in high school, but they've been stuck in that same position.
Right.
And to me, one of the quotes that really hit hard was, I think it was Jefferson that said, most people die at 25 and aren't buried till 75.
Mm. Yeah.
I don't ever want to die and still be living here on earth. I'll have micro deaths that happen along the way, these old versions of myself. And every 7 years, we replace every single cell in our body. So I'm not that same version, but I'm always growing and expanding despite the things that happen from me, to me, through me, regardless. And a big part of that forgiveness is also remembering the interconnectedness and remembering that we're a spiritual being having a human experience. If we can do that and say, okay, I'm a little bit too much in the material world, from a spiritual perspective. And when I do these indigenous retreats out in South Carolina on indigenous land there a couple times a year, we dig into some of these pieces, which do deal quite a bit with forgiveness. What if this person who hurt you, deceived you, conned you, whatever it may be, what if this is all in soul contract and this is actually one of your light brothers and sisters on the other side, and you all wrote this out and you actually walked up to that individual and said, can you play that role for me here on planet Earth so I can learn XYZ lesson? Because we all do come from the same stuff. So what if that individual said, sure, and they sign it and they say, yeah, I'll play that role for you. Their light dims a little bit and they go play that role for you here on Earth. And they're doing you a favor as part of your soul family. And it was a contract. And from that standpoint, forgiveness is an understanding that maybe you set this situation up in some capacity so that you could have a lesson and experience and grow into the individual you are today. Part of the evolution process. Now, I want to leave one really important thing here. I'm not using this in any capacity as a spiritual bypass of the human experience to say, hey, if somebody does something god awful to them, hey, you guys signed a contract, so you guys should just be buddies. Like, no, that's the harmony of do no harm and take no shit. And I do believe that there on earth also needs to be the lessons and the punishments for those who do things to others that are out of integrity, out of alignment, and cause, irreparable damages in that case too.
Yeah. One very high level and important underlying message here is that when individuals get stuck in a grievance story and they're stuck, they're not letting go, they're not moving on into whatever future their life holds. They're hurting themselves.
Right.
So those people who are still complaining about their divorce or still talking negatively about their ex or about the doctor that, performed the wrong procedure or whatever the grievance may be 5-10 years later, then that's an opportunity for them to work on that area and find a way to transform and move on.
Absolutely. One area that we don't think about with that's very interesting is music and musicians. We relate to all different types of music based on our own experiences, and those music are at certain vibrations, right? So think of somebody here in a vibration of anger on the Hawkins scale, like Eminem.
Yeah.
He came out with really pissed off, angry at his wife music in a way that created huge shock and made him incredibly famous and made him incredibly wealthy. Now, he was in his 20s at the time. He went through the life journey, and now he's looking back in his 40s and 50s and reflecting on that. But he's got to step on stage and do his concerts and sing and perform those same songs with that same energy and that same angst, and talk about stuck in an energy vibration that isn't that version. One musician that stepped away from that in a really interesting way and has spoken about it is Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam. He was like, I got a great wife, a great life, all this. He's like, I don't need to be singing this style of music anymore because I don't live in that vibration that was so relatable in the 90s of the, grunge music, which is life is hard and stressful and awful and everybody's singing like this. Yeah. Like, it is really depressing. And I then went to Seattle once, where most of those businesses come from, and I go, I figured grunge music out. It's seasonal affective disorder. Played through music. That's what it is. This is just sad. This is just seasonal affective disorder.
Right.
You don't hear the stuff coming out of Jamaica.
Right. That's for sure. Yeah.
So when it comes to people stuck in a grievance story, the homework I would give them, if they are open to it, is leave your environment. Doesn't need to be permanent, but look at your ecosystem and say, I'm piecing out for at least a week to go get into a different place and a different environment and a different perspective, so I can, from that angle, balance my nervous system and look at my life from the outside before I come back and say, who do I want to be when I step back into it?
And you tell them not to go to Seattle, right?
Definitely don't go to Seattle. Go to Jamaica, man.
Yeah.
Light a spliff and you forget life completely. Yeah. I would definitely say don't do Seattle. Go to the energy of somewhere like Maui if you can. Yeah. Oh my God, that would be the ideal.
Yeah.
I've not seen too many people pissed off while in Maui.
Right. So. Right. Exactly. Great. Well, Kyle, look, this has been really interesting, and I'm just grateful that you agreed to come on and share some of your wisdom with our listeners today.
My absolute pleasure, and grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.